Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you could walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Science and Spirituality Podcast. This is Chris, and I'm here with Kevin, your hosts. And today we wanted to talk about being a beginner, embracing the suck, I'm putting that in quotes, and learning curves. And I thought that this was a great topic because I feel like as people are home, and what's today's date? April?
No, it's May 1st. What's up?
Yeah, and so in the United States, a lot of people are still quarantined. And so I feel like there's this attempt for a lot of people to try new things. And so we just wanted to talk a little bit about being a beginner and what that process is like. And I guess I kind of wanted to start out by saying that it's important to realize that all of like the experts that you know and all the people that you look up to in your life, at one point, they were also a beginner. And so when you go into trying new things with the correct mentality, it can help you overcome some of the stumbling blocks that you might face in the very beginning. One of them being, I don't know shit. I don't know anything about this. This is something I've never attempted before. And then also the stumbling block of just assuming that you're going to be good at something right away. And so if you have the right mentality going into it, it can really help you with those stumbling blocks. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we can't, like you were saying, like that every expert, every person we look up to who has maybe like the confidence we want or the results we want in health wise, like the fitness, or maybe a certain financial abundance that they have. Like most people, like, I don't know, 90% of people, like didn't start out that way. Now, like say, for example, finances, like people have a leg up depending on their family and their financial situation, but everyone still had to start out somewhere as a beginner of some sort, like in managing money, or if like you're wanting to start a new hobby or career, it's always going to be just a base level beginning. And if you think that you're going to be this amazing person, like now talent has something to do with it. But if you start off with thinking like, I'm going to be as good as, someone I look up to, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. And one of the things that you said was like, as a stumbling block, like, it's easier to overcome stumbling blocks when you have the correct perspective when you begin. One of those stumbling blocks, and I'd say one of the biggest ones, is the mindset. Is like one stumbling block is, I think I should be further along than I actually am. And it's just our thoughts about it. And as we think that, we're focusing on the wrong thing, which is focusing on the progress we haven't made yet, whereas we are not acknowledging the progress that you have made, even if it's tiny in the beginning. And then we start to give up, even if it's a month, 2 months, 3 months in, heck, even 6 months or a year, and we feel like we're not where we should be, then we're negating all of the efforts we actually put in already. So it's like, it just like blocks us from that extra, effort that we could put in to becoming better.
Yeah. Like if you go into it with the wrong mindset, you can feel discouraged after a little bit amount of time.
Yeah.
I also think too, what's really important, which I didn't mention in the very beginning, is when you're going to start something new, it's also important to think about how much being good at that thing matters to you.
Yeah.
Because
desire.
I feel like a lot of people might start something, be like, oh, this is something I want to, give it a shot. And that's fine. It's fine. But if you don't establish how much you actually want this and what being good at it is actually going to mean to you at the end, you might stop in the beginning or in the middle or even towards the end of the process, because the process is where everything is actually going to happen. Like yes, you'll get good at it one day, but you got to put in the work. And so being able to put in that work and consistent work, because it's something that you really want, is also really important too. I'm not discouraging people from trying things. I'm just saying, like, it's okay to try things and quit if you really don't like doing it. But if something really matters to you, like defining that up front, almost like defining a why or having a vision for what it would look like once you get good at it, might be able to propel you forward when you're in those stuck times. And then I also just wanted to tie in a little bit about the nervous system to this as well. Like when you're trying new things for the first time, you gotta give your body some time to acclimate, your body and your mind to acclimate to these new things, and understand that in the beginning you might suck at it just because you're not used to doing it. But then the more and more you do it, the more and more you'll get used to it, the more comfortable you'll get doing it. And then, you can really take off from there. But the very beginning, like building up that momentum, it's kind of like what we got talked about in our last episode, Kev. Like building that momentum in the beginning is really important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there was something you said that just brought something up in my mind. You're talking about the nervous system and how it takes time. Oh, yes. Like scientific studies prove that building a new habit, which is in essence, like you're starting to get good at what you're doing and what you want to be doing, building a new habit doesn't just take 21 days, as most people think. I think we mentioned that on the last episode too, is that 21 days is the minimum of building a new habit. 66 days is the average of building a habit that actually sticks. And so if we think that like we're going to be this like rock star or whatever we're trying in the first 30 days, then we're going to give up way sooner than it actually takes to build that habit of first actually being consistent, but then eventually to then build up mastery in this. And that just popped something else in my mind. There's a study on mastery. It's like, how long does it take to master something? It's an average is about 10,000 hours. I think it's in a book called The Tipping Point.
It's also in a book called Talent is Overrated.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so once you're done, I have a good point from that book, actually.
Okay. I'm not sure it's The Tipping Point because I don't think I've read The Tipping Point yet, but it's another Malcolm Gladwell book, Outliers. That's the book. Yeah. He studies like, okay, the people who are exceeding expectations of what they, other people do in say like their field, like whether it's in sports or in business or in money or in relationships, that mastery comes after a certain amount of time. And he like the study is done, it's like about 10,000 hours. So it goes back to the point where you're sharing, huh?
That's a lot of time. 10,000 hours.
That's 5 years of 40 hours a week putting into this, whatever you want to do. And so that goes back to just want to touch on the point again, is having a desire, not just a lukewarm, like, oh, let's see how this works out, but a freaking burning desire. Like, I want this with all my heart and I'm willing to put in the effort.
Yeah.
Gotta find that.
It's also funny too, like thinking about that amount of time. It's just such at odds with our society today, where it's become so like, I need it now, I want it now, like quick fix kind of things. Like you can go on Instagram now and probably scroll long enough and you'll get ads for like signing up for this thing or signing up for that thing. It's like, I'm going to make you this, whatever, you know what I mean? But it's like, those things are great, but it's like the consistent work that goes into it that actually is going to make you into a success or into a failure.
Yep.
The book that I was referring to, Talent is Overrated, this guy, so they probably talk about similar research in Talent is Overrated and Outliers, but this guy was studying what it takes to be a master at something, and he actually used his kids as like a 10-year experiment, where he had 2 daughters, and at the time, this is like the 1950s or 40s or whatever, where there was like 0 women who played competitive chess. So he had 2 daughters, and he started training them to play chess from the age of like 4. And both of them became world champions by the age of 17 because they put in hours. Like he didn't even know how to play chess. He was like, I'm just gonna pick a random thing. Like there's no woman in this sport really yet. I'm just gonna pick this and I'm gonna like put this to the test. And so his daughters racked up a certain amount of hours of playing the game and it was also in a specific way too, where it was like, you have to be challenged when you practice. Like 1,000 hours. You can't be like doing something easy. It's got to be like on the edge where it's not too easy, but it's also not too hard. Like right in that sweet spot of like, it's pushing your abilities.
Yeah.
Because you get better and better. And a good analogy to that, which most people can probably understand, is working out. Like when you go to the gym, you lift 5 pounds. You don't automatically go to 50 pounds. You go to 7.5, and then you go to 10. Like you just do enough so that the next day your muscles are sore. You got that like those tears, the micro tears in your muscle. If you do too light, you're not going to get that. But if you do too heavy, you're going to get injured. So it's like finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Really good book.
I'd edit what you just said is like not just enough. Well, I know what you meant, but just to clarify, is like just more than enough. I think because like enough is like where it's like easy and you've hit the top of your comfort zone. But growth comes from where you go that little extra. That
you got to challenge.
The extra mile.
Yeah.
And I like this. We were talking about this example before we started recording, but I want to just bring it up now. Is like we all face this. We're all human, and so what we're talking about is things we've done in our life. And I've been on both ends of the spectrum where I've expected too much of myself and got discouraged too easy, and then where I've actually put in the time and had the correct perspective. And so the time when I felt like I was over expecting or like expecting something to happen way sooner was when I started my business, my coaching business in 2017. And I'd seen many of my colleagues go from zero and just starting their business to like over six figures in a year, or 2 years, or 3 years. And so I had in my mind, like, okay, my goal is I'm going to do it this year. But the thing was, number one, I was 24. Not to say that that's wrong, not bad at all, but like I didn't have any really experience in coaching and even building a business at that point. So I had this expectation that I was going to hit $100,000 in the first year, and I fell short of it. I got to 50%. And I actually was discouraged. And there was a couple of times in that first year what I was wanting to quit, like literally quit, because I had this expectation of myself that was way beyond what was actually like the reality of what was happening, of just like the growth that I needed to then grow to then be able to earn six figures. And so it's like, if I had the correct perspective of just giving it time, I know I would be in a very different place than I am now. But of
Mm.
course, you know, everything is a learning process. Like, and I learned about this principle of just giving it time and not having these full blown expectations that will cause you to be discouraged and not put in the effort. Because again, there were times where I was so close, but the reason I didn't quit was because of the burning desire.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with that.
Yeah, and indeed, like if you don't mind me sharing too, like there's been points where like you felt like quitting.
Yeah, and I called you.
Yeah, and then you just have to like that's gonna happen too, and I think that's important to understand that like, and I've faced this too, even with like studying acupuncture. Like I remember in the very beginning, I was just so on fire about it, and there was times like when I'm like, yo, I don't even know if this is for me anymore. But then like you talk to a friend or like you kind of reconnect with why you're doing it in the first place, and then you're like, actually like shit, like this is what I want to do. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's also important too, like understanding that that might happen along the way too, that you just because you're not on 24/7 365 doesn't mean that like you don't have a desire for that thing. It just means that like,
Yeah.
hey, you need to take a rest and reset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One I also wanted to just mention one thing about the growth that you were talking about. I read in a book that every like living thing has like an optimal growth rate,
Mm.
and sometimes we like as humans think that we should be going faster than we actually are, and we're living things, so we have an optimal growth rate too. And like I'm looking at that tree behind you, the little bamboo thing, like you'll never see that bamboo argue about, oh, I'm not growing fast enough or I'm
Yeah.
growing too slow. Like it's growing exactly how fast it's supposed to, you know what I mean? And so it's understanding that too, that like it's cool to like push and try to grow as fast as you can, but then also understand that like there's a balance that has to go into it as well. That's why a lot of
Absolutely.
startups actually fail, because they grow too fast.
Mm. Mm-hmm. That's good to keep in mind for
Yeah.
sure. So I guess the question then becomes like, okay, what is my optimal growth rate? And it
And then,
just,
yeah. And
just go ahead, go ahead.
that just comes back to like, I feel like the underpinning of a lot of our episodes is like self awareness, like
Yeah,
awareness,
exactly.
waking up and turning inward. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. Is just like, yeah, with that question is like, what is my optimal growth rate? And the way you'll know is that it'll feel really good to you. It'll challenge you. You know, like you might think like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how that's going to happen, but like it's inspiring. Whereas like my goal of like 100,000, like it was daunting
Mm,
actually, to the point where I didn't believe it.
yeah.
So like the sweet spot is it's gonna challenge you, and you're like, oh man, like it kind of like makes your heart start beating faster of like what you want to achieve. But then like you have a level of connection with believing that it is possible and you can do it.
Yeah.
Not like where it's like so big where it's like, oh, like shit, like that, where it starts to discourage you even before you even start trying.
And that's cool because it relates back to like the sweet spot we were talking about earlier in the episode.
Yeah,
Like when you're becoming good at something, you want to find that part where it just challenges you enough, like
yeah,
to like grow,
exactly.
but not too much where you hurt yourself, or too little
Yeah.
where there's actually growth that's happening.
Yeah. And so with this, just to keep in mind that you cannot compare your process of growth with someone else, even if it seems very similar to what you're doing. Like, for example, I was comparing myself in my first year of coaching to my other colleagues, but I didn't take into account their own growth. And many of them are in their late 30s and 40s and 50s. So they have had so much more life experience. Some even have started businesses before. And so like, there's a difference in everyone's growth. So like you cannot compare, even if it's in the same industry and even if you're trying to do the same exact thing, everyone has a different experience and a different starting point. So you have to just be mindful of that, so you're not comparing. But at least if you're going to be looking to someone else, just use it as an inspiration for yourself.
Like, yeah, they can do it, so I can do it, kind of
exactly
thing.
Yeah, at the very least
Possible to do.
Yeah
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, so let's end that here. I think that's powerful, to end that. And yeah, use this in your life. Reflect on what is your optimal growth rate, what you feel is possible for you, and also is a stretch, and that will inspire you, so that you're inspired to take action, but not, again, discouraged. Is like, this is too much for me.
Awesome.
And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton
and at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.